Jenny McMillan, and especially thank Jenny for helping us out with a little technical surprise that we had this morning. So I appreciate the flexibility on that. And I want to let everyone know, go ahead and locate the chat room. You're going to find that either by moving your mouse around or by using your touchpad. And you're looking for either a green bubble that would look like a chat bubble you see in a cartoon, or you're looking for the word more with 3 dots above it. And if you click on either of those, you'll see the word chat, and that'll get you into the chat room. I'm going to ask you if you would just let us know your name and the county that you're with. And I'm going to just do a little reminder to please keep your cameras off. And we've got it set so your microphones are muted, and to please continue to leave them muted throughout the rest of the webinar. And a reminder, let's go ahead and start our recording. Excellent. And just again, the chat room looks like this. And so if you haven't already, go ahead, open up this box, go down to the bottom where you see the words type message here. When you go ahead and make a little note or put in a question, and then hit enter, everyone will be able to see your question or your comment. Typically do a little bit of a reminder that we will be holding questions, but there will be times throughout the webinar where we can stop and look at what questions have been able to come up and give Janet a chance to answer. And just letting you know, for this particular webinar, we're going to be going through some of the PowerPoint slides, then we're going to stop for a moment, switch to a short video, about 5 minutes, and then we're going to come back to the live presentation in the PowerPoint. All right? So now I'm literally going to hand over the microphone to Janet, and she'll be with us.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you for joining our webinar on voter registration this afternoon. As Julie said, my name's Janet Zellman. I'm the voter registration coordinator for the Orange County Democratic Party. With many rules for voting changing, there's a lot of confusion about voter registration and the photo ID requirements to vote. So we want to make sure that everyone is up to date with current requirements and current forms. Today, we face serious challenges to the foundation of our country and democracy itself. Every day seems to bring a new assault on our institutions. So now's not the time to stay silent, and it's not the time to stay still. As Martin Luther King said during a very important struggle in our history, this is a time for vigorous and it's a time for positive action. Registering voters is a perfect opportunity to turn anger into action, to work to bring about positive change and to preserve and protect our democracy. Votes matter. One vote can turn an election. In 2015, 69 elections were decided by 5 votes or less in North Carolina. In 21 of those elections, how one person voted made the difference who won or who lost. So looking at these numbers, there can now be no question that every vote counts, and every registration we get can create another voter. So when you're registering, remember, your efforts can make a difference by getting crucial voters registered. Okay, so this presentation will be divided into 3 sections. First, we'll review voter registration procedures and the new voter registration form. Second, we'll talk about how the new photo ID requirements, for voting in 2020. Third, we'll discuss questions that voters frequently ask about registering to vote. Okay, the purpose of this section will be to review the voter registration process. So who can register to vote? These qualifications are listed at the bottom of the voter registration application. You can see them by referring to the blank application that you have received. So to qualify to vote, to register to vote, a person must be a United States citizen, at least 18 years of age or will be by the date of the next general election. 16 or 17-year-olds can pre-register to vote. This does not change the voting age. Applications will be processed by the Board of Elections and held until the birth date triggers their eligibility to register and vote. They will then be mailed their voter registration verification card. A voter must have resided in North Carolina, the county and precinct, for at least 30 days prior to an election to vote in that precinct. There is some confusion about this qualification. This requirement does not require you to live 30 days in that precinct to register. It is only to vote. It does not require you to live there 30 days to register, only to vote in that precinct. Finally, and this is also a very important qualification that we need to pay attention to. In North Carolina, unlike in some states, an individual who is serving a felony sentence, once they have completed that sentence, including their probation and parole, their voting rights are restored and no documents are needed to register. This is very important that when you are registering, you are aware of this qualification. We've had an example in the last election in Alamance County where 12 individuals who were not informed about this qualification did register and did vote, and as a result, they were arrested and charged and jailed, not knowing that their voting rights had not been restored. So it is important that we have the information and make sure that when we are registering voters, we are aware and make sure that everyone is aware of what their rights are to register and to vote. If someone has been convicted of a misdemeanor, that does not take away their rights to vote. And failure to pay restitution or being convicted of a misdemeanor does not block the right to vote. And if you have been charged but not convicted, that also does not take away your right to vote. This is a legal document, so we ask before anybody signs this form that they read those qualifications at the bottom of the form or have them read to them before they sign and date this document. We will now stop and answer any questions that you may have submitted to the chat room. Am I talking too fast? Okay, since there are no questions, we will continue. This is a copy of the new registration form that you should have received before this presentation. The reason for the revision of this form is North Carolina now has 2 new recognized political parties, the Green Party and the Constitution Party. Other than that, there are only a few other formatting changes. In order that you can what we would like to do now is we will show you a short video on completing the form so that you will be more comfortable with it going forward.
Hi, this is Julie again. And what we're going to do for a moment right now is to end the PowerPoint, and we're going to go to our video. And get that going. Thank you.
Hey, my name is Kristen.
I'm Austin.
And today we're going to talk to you guys about registering voters. North Carolina just updated the voter registration form for 2018. And what with election laws changing these days, it can get a little confusing. So let's start with the form.
So there are a few required things in sections 1, 2, and parts of 3 and 4. Section 1 asks if the person is a U.S. citizen and will be 18 years old by election day. If they check no to either of those, kindly take the form out of their hands because they are not yet eligible to vote.
Now for section 2. Section 2 asks the person to write down their full legal name, that is first, middle, and last name, as well as if they are a junior, senior, or the third. Pretty easy, right? But this is important information that the Board of Elections has to have, and they will also ask you to write down your birth date in Section 3.
Section 3 asks for either a North Carolina driver's license or ID number, or the final 4 digits of the person's social security number. If they can provide both, that's fine, but we only need one. Also, if they can't provide either, that's okay too, we can still get them registered, but they'll receive a letter from the Board of Elections stating that they need to provide some form of identification when they go out and vote for the first time.
Section 4 is the residential address, or as I like to call it, the home address. Where are you currently living? This information has to be fully and clearly written out. Why is it so important? Well, the Board of Elections has to designate a voting precinct for the person registering to vote, right? Right. So you have to make sure that the person you're registering fully and completely writes out their entire address. That means the apartment, lot, or unit number, the street name, the city, the state of North Carolina, of course, the zip code, and the county that they're living in. And they should also note whether or not they have been living there for 30 days or more, because in order to vote in a precinct, you have to have been living there for at least a month.
It's also really important to update this information if or when it changes. In order to make sure your vote counts and can't be challenged, you have got to keep your address updated. There's a part of Section 4 designed for those who don't have a physical address, like people who are homeless and living on the street. They can provide an address for where they live or sleep and must provide a valid mailing address. Section 5 is the voter's mailing address. This only needs to be filled out if they receive mail at a place other than their residential address. So the person has to put down a residential address. And if they receive mail at a P.O. box or something like that, they must put down a mailing address as well. It's really important that both of these are valid because that's how the Board of Elections will verify their registration.
Now let's take a look at Section 6. Section 6 is completely optional. The Board of Elections just wants to get some demographic information here, so they're going to ask you about your race, ethnicity, and your gender. We encourage you guys to fill that out, but again, it is completely up to you.
Section 7 asks about party affiliation. Now this party affiliation thing, please do not under any circumstance suggest that a person register for any particular party. You can, however, provide information about elected officials from parties. For example, you might say President Obama was a Democrat and President Bush was a Republican. The voter registration form offers 5 parties for which North Carolinians can register. This includes the Democratic Party, Republican Party, Libertarian Party, Green Party, and Constitution Party. If a voter chooses not to register under any particular party, they will be listed as unaffiliated. Unaffiliated voters choose which primary ballots they want to vote on. So, an unaffiliated voter will choose the Democratic primary ballot, Republican primary ballot, or that for any other party. There's also an unaffiliated primary ballot, which only lists nonpartisan races, like bonds and other ballot measures.
Section 8 is where you can list your previous voter registration address or name. This makes it easier to cancel your old registration, and it helps the Board of Elections with their record keeping. Even if the person that you're registering can't remember their previous address, it is important that they write down whatever they can remember, such as the city or the county. Section 9 pertains to the voter's phone number. Now, personally, I don't like to put my phone number on forms because I don't like people calling me, but I do write it down for the Board of Elections. This is so that if there's an issue with the voter registration form, they can reach out to you immediately to correct it.
Now, this last part of the section is the voter's signature. The voter must sign and date the form on their own. You can help them with any other part of the form if they want you to, but they must do this by themselves. This is because it attests that all the information on the form is correct to the voter's knowledge. If the voter signs the form knowingly with false information, they can be charged with a Class I felony. So this is a serious document, and we want to be sure that everything is 100% correct. Bottom line, the more information that's on the form, the better it is for everyone.
Hopefully now you guys know a little bit more about voter registration. And maybe you can host a voter registration drive or register yourself or your friends. If you have any questions, please reach out to Democracy North Carolina at the phone number or the email address on the screen. Thanks for listening.
Hello, everyone. This is Julie again. I hope that you enjoyed our short little movie break there. And we are going back to our regularly scheduled programming. So we're going back into our PowerPoint. And now I'm going to pass it over back to Janet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. You all should have a blank voter registration form that was just referred to in the video. What we'd like you to do now is take the form and fill it out as if you were registering yourself. What I'd like you to do is fill it out as completely as you can. Go beyond just the items that are indicated in red text. We'll take just a few minutes to do this, and then we'll review it together. Thank you. Yeah, please let us know when you're finished by writing in the chat box. I should give like about 3 minutes. Well, we should do that afterwards. I can do what?
Hey, this is Julie again, just popping in. I just want to double check to see if people had had an opportunity to print out the registration form. If you have, could you let us know? If you didn't, do you just want to go into the chat room and let us know for a second? All right. Oh, excellent. Yeah, so happy to see that. Clearly, our goal here is to increase your familiarity with the form so that when you are hosting registration drives and when you are giving instructions for others on how to help people register within their precinct, that they're going to feel comfortable because you're so familiar with the form and you're going to be able to answer their questions. So we've learned from doing this is typically some of the common questions and issues come up. You're going to discover them today as you're working with the form yourself. All right? And again, just let us know how you're doing. When we see that most people have completed the form, then Janet is going to come back in. All right? Thanks so much.
Where's the what? It's not alternate. Okay. Yeah, right. Okay, now that you've had a chance to do that, let's review this together. And we'll go through this section by section. Section 1. Did you remember to check the appropriate box or boxes This section is required and is often overlooked because of the clipboard. Section 2. Fill out your legal name as it's shown on your driver's license or social security card. It's unclear how close a voter's name on their ID needs to match the name on the voter roll. If someone does not have a middle name, leave it blank. Do not put none, and do not put any mark in that space. In terms of Section 3, the date of birth is required. However, the state and country of birth is not required. However, we are asking that also be provided by the voter. This is an example where we're asking that the form be as complete as possible beyond just the required items in red. For example, if someone has forgotten to check that top box and the form gets turned in, if they have indicated their state of country or birth and it is the United States or a state within the United States that indicates their citizenship, the Board of Elections will accept it. Further in Section 3, another example of something that is not indicated as required, but we want the voter to provide the information, and that is either their North Carolina driver's license or the last 4 digits of their social security number. If an individual does not provide one of these, 2 is better, but 1 will be adequate. They will need to show some form of ID when they first go to vote. We want to eliminate that extra step on the part of the voter, so we are asking that be provided. If they do not, also, the Board of Elections will send them a notice that information be provided when they first go to vote. Section 4 is your residential address. Where do you currently live? Plan to return. This cannot be a post office box. This is your address. This is your current address. If you have an address, if you get your mail, and this address determines where your precinct will be indicated. Section 5 is only if you receive mail at another address, a post office box, or perhaps an address where you're not currently living. The county is optional in Section 4. In some cases, we see people, if you did put USA there, thinking it read county, you're not alone. So just remember that. It's often a common mistake. Section 5 is for individuals who have no permanent address, who we would be defining as homeless. They must indicate a cross street where they live, because again, this will be where they indicate that they currently spend their time, where they live, where they sleep, because this will define their precinct. They also will need a mailing address. This can be a friend, it can be a relative, it can be a shelter. It does not have to be in North Carolina. Section 6 is optional. It is not required. The Board of Elections likes to have this information because it helps them monitor any bias in the process. Section 7, if an individual does not mark a specific party, they will be registered unaffiliated. If they mark unaffiliated or are registered as unaffiliated, that will allow them to pick any ballot in a primary of a recognized North Carolina party. Section 8. You need to complete this only if you have been registered in another county or another state. If the voter cannot remember everything, then their state and county would be enough. We'd rather have them put the correct information and have less than we'd rather have less information that's correct more information that's incorrect. Finally, we ask that we have people give a phone number. Even though oftentimes people are reluctant to do that, we assure them that this phone number is important. So if there is a problem with the Board of Elections, when they receive the form, they will and can contact them to correct any issue that presents. Finally, is the signature. Before anybody completes this by signing it, this is a legal document. We want to make sure that they have read all the qualifications to register and attest that they all are true. Either have them read it or read it to them. In terms of a signature, any mark is acceptable by the Board of Elections. An X is acceptable. No witness is required. Any mark. I had one individual who printed their signature, and that was accepted by the Board of Elections. Finally, make sure it's dated. After the person has completed the form, we ask that you please review it. Make sure that it's legible. Make sure it's complete. Make sure whether that's a C or that's a G, if that's an S or that's a 5. These, if you can't read it, chances are the Board of Elections can't either. When I was up at the Board of Elections at the last election, there was a stack of forms they could not process because they could not read them. So we want to make sure that that does not happen this time around. So we're going to stop now and answer any questions that you might have. But remember, when you're registering, engage voters. Ask, are you registered at your current address, or can I help you update your registration? We also are asking, would you like information on the new photo ID requirements? Be nonpartisan. You cannot tell people what party to register for, and you must register anyone regardless of any party they select. Offer to fill out the form for the voter, but they must sign it. And please double check the application before the voter leaves. Is it complete? Is it accurate? Is it legible? So thank you. We have received some questions. We will now look at the photo ID law. And we'll try to answer any question that you have presented before this presentation and also while we are proceeding through it. The law requiring a photo ID beginning in 2020 can be confusing, and it is in flux. So while there are currently 2 lawsuits pending challenging the photo ID, one from the NAACP and one from six individuals, the court is not stopping IDs from being required in the upcoming elections. So given that North Carolina presidential primary is March 3rd, it is important to begin educating voters now about having acceptable photo ID when they first go to vote. Some important points to begin with. Remember, photo ID is not required in any election in 2019. But beginning in 2020, voters will be asked to show a photo ID. ID will be required when voting in person or by absentee mail. Voting by absentee mail, the requirement for photo ID when voting by absentee mail is new. And right now, it is not clear whether the voters have to submit the copy of photo ID when they send back their absentee ballot, when they send their request for the absentee ballot, or when it is not clear when they request the absentee ballot or when they send that ballot back to vote. And we're going to talk more about this as we go forward. Okay, there are many acceptable forms of photo IDs for voting in 2020. You have received the form that is shown in the bottom right-hand corner, which really explains or provides information in great detail about the law's requirements and provisions. I'm just going to go through and highlight a couple elements of a few points of the law. I think you'll find when you are registering and inquiring about photo ID that many people do have an acceptable ID. A driver's license from North Carolina, a North Carolina driver's license, we find most people do have. However, an out-of-state driver's license can only be used if the voter registration is within 90 days of the election. If they do not have either of those, there are alternatives, such as the free North Carolina voter ID card from the Board of Elections and from the ID from the Department of Motor Vehicles, which we will be talking about in more detail. An important point to remember, and we're getting this question often, is that a real ID is not required to vote. It can be used, but it is not required. Student IDs. There has been a lot of interest in terms of our student IDs valid to use as a photo ID. Currently, IDs for students and employees at 72 North Carolina institutions have been approved. Unfortunately, however, UNC is not one of them. For institutions to become approved, they have to explain in detail the process used to ensure that photos that are not taken by the school or its agents are that of the student. They have to submit documentation stating the process that verifies that the student's citizenship, social security number, and birth date has been verified. And the institutions have until November 1st to apply for this clearance. As I mentioned, the form that you have has additional information that you can refer to, and you can also check with the North Carolina State Board of Elections.gov for additional details on the photo ID. So what if an individual does not have an acceptable photo ID? There are alternatives. One is to get a free ID from the County Board of Elections. This is a relatively easy process to do. All that is required is your name, date of birth, the last 4 digits of your social security number, and the fact that you are registered or will be registered when you apply. Another alternative is to obtain a non-operator photo ID from the North Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles. This, however, requires documents that are not always accessible to a voter, such as proof of age and identity, an original birth certificate, social security number, proof of residency. This can often be an impediment to many people. I did have a conversation with a woman whose mother was elderly, and they could not locate a birth certificate for her. And she was not aware that you could get a free ID from the County Board of Elections with much fewer requirements. So it's important that we are aware of these alternatives to make sure that people do have an acceptable photo ID when they go to vote. The third alternative is to vote a provisional ballot. You may vote a provisional ballot if you live in a natural disaster area with 100 days of an election, have a religious objection to being photographed, or sign an affidavit declaring a reasonable impediment that prevents you from showing a photo ID. Reasonable impediments are such as a work schedule, lack of transportation, disability or illness, ID lost or stolen, family responsibilities, photo ID applied for but not received, or other. Federal law requires that anyone who presents to vote will be given the opportunity to vote, whether by regional, regular, or provisional ballot, and no one will be turned away if they do not have a photo ID. Anyone that is signing this affidavit declaring a reasonable impediment and completing a provisional ballot, that ballot will be counted. Finally, frequently asked questions. Should we?
I'm going to ask you a couple of questions
Okay.
that have come in. One was, how do you identify unregistered voters?
Wait, how do I identify unregistered voters?
Can you repeat that question just so to make sure I heard that?
How do I identify unregistered voters? At this point in time, that is a process that we are trying to determine. We set up certain events where we feel people are likely to attend, and we have them self-identify if they are registered or not.
So you can ask.
Right.
How are the Board of Elections staffed? Do they have office hours statewide?
Yeah, they are Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Probably want to repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. How are the Board of Elections staffed? Do they have office hours statewide? Yes, they are staffed Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Are all counties offering photo IDs? The answer is yes. In fact, they are required by the law to do so. And they are actually holding seminars throughout the state to inform and educate people about the photo ID laws, what is acceptable, and how they can be obtained. I think. Okay, I think we'll go ahead with frequently asked questions. You also have where do you fill out the affidavit at polling places? Except for the absentee ballot, that is my understanding where that affidavit would be provided and completed. So frequently asked questions, we find that oftentimes people, even if they approach us about their registration status, if that is not an issue, that they often have frequently asked questions that is important that we are able to provide the answers to for them. So let's review the questions that we often get. First of all, does a person need a photo ID to register? No. No ID is required to register. Does a person need a photo ID to vote? Not now, but starting in 2020, a voter will be required to show an acceptable photo ID when they present to vote. Does a voter need to live in their precinct for 30 days to register? No. A person only needs to live in their precinct 30 days to vote in that precinct, not to register. Can a person register without providing their North Carolina license number or the last digits of their Social Security number? Yes, we can go ahead and register them, but they will need to provide a document showing their name and current address when they first go to vote. That would be such things as a utility bill, a pay stub, a bank statement. What if a voter doesn't select a political party or one not recognized? They will be registered as unaffiliated, and they can vote the ballot of any party that allows voters to vote in their primary. What if someone does not know if they are registered? Their status can be checked online by going to the website indicated on this sheet. They can also fill out another application. One thing that we often find is people will come up and ask and not sure if they are registered or not. So even while they are there, whether you or they or has a smartphone can check that status at the time. It does not hurt, however, to fill out another registration application. We also ask that if they have not gotten their verification card back from the Board of Elections to indicate that their application has been processed, that they go on that website to verify that indeed the registration has been approved and processed. Can a voter take the voter registration application home to complete later? Yes. We like people to complete it at the time and assure them that it only takes a couple minutes to complete. However, we also appreciate that sometimes this is not possible, and also they may want to take it for another person, friend or family member. If that is the case, what we recommend that you do is write the address of their County Board of Elections on the application. It has a better chance of being submitted. Can you register someone from another North Carolina county? Yes, this form is good in any county in North Carolina. In Orange County, we often register voters from several counties in the area. In that case, we take all the completed forms to the Orange County Board of Elections, and they will refer those forms. They will send those forms on to the correct Board of Elections. Can someone register and vote if they miss a 25 registration deadline? Yes. The registration deadline for the upcoming municipal elections is October 11th. Anyone after that date, if they have missed that deadline, can still register by going to a one-stop early voting site. However, they will need to provide a document showing their name and current address if this is a choice they decide to make. Can a convicted felon vote in North Carolina? Yes, if the sentence including probation and parole has been completed and no special documents are needed to re-register. So registering, remember, ask, are you registered to vote at your current address? Oftentimes people don't realize that they need to update their registration every time they move. People have asked me, well, I just moved down the hall in my apartment. I just moved across the street or just across town. Yes, you still need to update your registration. Remain nonpartisan. Offer to fill out the application, but they must sign it. And please ask them to fill in more than just the required items in red. The more complete, the better. Encourage voters to provide a phone number so that the Board of Elections can follow up if there is a problem with their application. I have had applications come in where, for example, some of those top boxes weren't checked and there was no phone number. We want to avoid that happening going forward. Please review the form before the voter leaves. Is it legible? Is it complete? And consider reviewing by viewing the training video that you saw today at the website indicated on the form. And remember, most of all, have fun. Registering voters is important, rewarding, and you can make a difference. So thank you for joining me today. If you have any other questions, apparently you do. Yes, can we still use the old voter registration form? And the answer is yes, that form can still be used. How long do you have to get a completed registration form to the Board of Elections? They prefer that we get it to them as soon as we can. There is not a drop dead deadline to get them there, but we do try to get them as soon as we can after they've been completed.
All right, well, thank you again, everyone. for joining us today. And I hope that you have learned some information both about the new form and some of the new requirements coming up, keeping in mind that they are still making some decisions and choices about what forms of ID are going to be acceptable, so that continues to remain fluid. I will ask you if you can go into the chat room again and just take a moment to send us a note on what worked for you, or what might be improved the next time we go to do a webinar or this particular webinar. We will have other training ones coming up throughout the fall, and we'll be sending you information about further webinars that are scheduled over the next few months. But thank you again so much for joining us. And if you do have questions, if you're like me, sometimes, the question comes an hour after the webinar or a week after the webinar, and that's fine too. You can go ahead and email either Jenny or me at the email address that is shown on the screen. And I'm going to leave this up for a second. So again, you've got a chance to go into the chat room or to copy down any information you might need. Whoops, we got one more question coming in. All right, so hold on a second. And let's see what we got. All right. And again, though, keep in mind, as any new information comes, we're trying to get that to you, but you're going to want to stay in touch with your local parties as well. Okay, we've got one more question. I'm going to send this over to Janet.
Can an affidavit be signed during same-day voting? I think that's an excellent question, and I don't have the answer. But it is a question that I would like the answer to, because again, this is all information is all very new and is still being, a lot of the things are still being clarified. So what I would like to do is follow up with that at the Board of Elections and get back to you, for me, for you, and for others who are likely going to have the same question going forward.
Okay, again, any questions that we're not able to answer today, you can continue to send them in. And if there's something that we need to look up and get back to you, we're going to do that as well. All right.
Any advice on organizing a registration drive? I actually have lots of advice, but it's not, this is not really the forum. There are organizations that do have information on that, such as Democracy North Carolina. And also, I would be more than happy to follow up at a different time to talk further about some of the procedures that we follow when we're setting up a voter registration drive. And I believe you have my contact. Send it to the c2ctrainings@orangedems.com, and I'd be more than happy to have a follow-up conversation about moving forward with that.
But that is a fabulous question. And I can't even imagine at this point how many registration drives that Janet herself has conducted and how many individual voters that she has registered. So she's the perfect person to ask for more specifics on that. If you are interested in that, please do send the question over to us at that c2ctrainings@orangedem.com's email address, so that we'll know who it is we need to get back to with this information. Okay. Oh, Jan's got another point.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting on that question about the affidavit be signed during same-day voting. My feeling is that it's likely that that would be done if someone presents it same day without a photo ID. However, just to make sure that I'm giving you the correct information, if that is not correct, I will make sure to get back to you and others that they have it confirmed.
All right, these are all wonderful, wonderful questions. And I'm especially excited to hear that folks are looking at setting up registration drives in their county or their precinct. I'm sure one of the things probably that Janet will be getting back to you is where she has found success in the past of places where they welcome this type of registration, and maybe even places to know that where they don't. All right, Janet, we've got another question for you.
Basically, you will be required, oh, I'm sorry. What are some of the reasons not to present a photo ID? By law, you will be required to present a photo ID. The only situations that you will not be able to present it is, again, if you live in a natural disaster area, have a religious objection, or you sign an affidavit declaring a reasonable impediment. And again, those reasons were work schedule, lack of transportation, disability or illness, ID lost or stolen, family responsibilities, or other. So, and you then again sign the affidavit that you cannot present it and do a provisional ballot, and that ballot will be counted.
Okay, and I always notice with that one of the first things that Janet mentions, of course, is the natural disaster. We live in a hurricane-prone area, and I know that there were issues with that, both with folks who might have been impacted by Florence, or even with Michael a little bit later. So there are actual reasons why somebody might have difficulty presenting with the photo ID or with other documentation. So these are all great questions. All right, looks like we are winding down. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I'll leave the screen up for probably another minute or so. I'm going to take the mic out. If there's any questions that come in afterwards, though, go ahead, send them to c2ctrainings@orangedenim.com, and we will get back to you. Thank you so much for joining us.